Okay. Today, inshallah, we're going to continue properties. What did we do last time? We talked about what a property is. We actually zoned in into the idea of what a property is. And the example we always used to make that distinction was the letter dhal and the letter tha, right? The letter dhal, without the vibration of the throat that we talked about, does not exist anymore. So we said, when we stop the vibration of the tongue, when we stop the vibration of the throat, the letter dhal completely transforms into another letter. This actually is not part of the places of articulation. We did not do that in the place of articulation. The place of articulation between dhal and tha are the same place of articulation. So that's the idea that we took the idea of properties from. Why did the scholars have the idea of properties? To uniquely identify a letter. I want to uniquely identify a letter conceptually, to teach a non-Arab or to teach the generations that come after what a letter actually is. The first thing we talked about was the place of articulation. Which parts of the tongue I actually use to emit that sound. Then what I did is I noticed that that's not enough, and we added the concept of properties, okay? Then we talked about, okay, so we had the place of articulation, okay? Then we had properties. And we talked about essential properties. Essential properties are properties such that if they don't exist, the letter changes. It's part of what the letter actually is. So we said in the letter dhal, without the vibration of the throat, the dhal as a letter does not even exist. So that's why it's an essential property. And then we talked about the non-essential, and we said ignore that part. And we said that all of Tajweed, the rest of Tajweed is in this part. What is this part? Is the properties that are added to the letter when two words combine. So we said min qabl. So the mim, noon, and then qaf. The noon, after the qaf, something happens to it. But it's not part of what a noon actually is. Noon is just n. Something just happens when another letter comes to it. So it's a non-essential property. And the rest of Tajweed is actually that. So what is Tajweed again? We talk about the place of articulation. Where do I emit the sound? Then I talk about properties such that without these properties, the letter does not even exist. Then I talk at the end about properties that happen when you combine words together. Okay, again, that's a review. I'm going to go much quicker because we need to go. Okay, now we're going to talk about the properties. Some of them have opposites and some of them don't have opposites. What's the idea of opposite? The idea of opposite is that an essential property answers a question and says yes. If every word has one of these two pairs of opposites. So we said an essential properties that have opposites. So there's two pairs. So if an Arabic letter is not in one of them, it has to be in the other. Because it's asked an essential question about the letter itself. Then we have properties that have no opposite. It's just that this letter has this unique property, something very unique to a certain letter, so we have to talk about it. Okay? But the ones with has opposites, every letter has to do something with it. Therefore, you have to actually look at it more clearly. Okay? Okay. So these two, right? So we finished the softness and we talked about the in-between. We're going to run through it really quickly. So the first pair, what does the first pair task about? The question is, does air flow? If yes, it's whisper. If no, it's jahr. So, what is a whisper? Is the abundant flow of air caused by the blah, blah, blah caused by the opening of the vocal cords. So flow of air, so this is that right here. What happens with that? You say an abundant flow of air caused by the opening of the vocal cords. The opposite of it is apparent. The imprisonment of most of the air cause of what? The vibration of the vocal cords. So this is dhal. Right? This is dhal. So dhal, restriction of a lot of air because of the vocal cords. Then we talked about, does sound flow? If yes, it's strength. If no, it's rakhawa, and there's something in between. And we talked about, so what is the idea? The air blocks because of the strong dependence on the makhraj. So you have a letter, like the letter qaf. The letter qaf actually, the tongue actually hits the makhraj. So because it hits the makhraj, it actually blocks the sound to actually flow. So what do you have? You have the blockage of sound. You have the blockage of sound. That's a big problem. Why is it a big problem? Well, if I have blockage of sound, how do I actually emit the letter? If you say up, the letter is completely blocked. How do I emit the letter? So, we said last class, some letters are part of the whisper. Remember the whisper that has a lot of air? And some of it are not part of the whisper. The part of the whisper is a kaf. Ak, ak, ak. So what do I do? The letters that are part of the whisper, I actually close the makhraj, then I emit the sound. I say ak. So I close, like we said, and then I emit the air. Because if you block the sound, you block the air. So how do I release from the blocking of the sound? I release by air. What about the ones that don't have air? Qalqala. And then there's one letter left, and we talked about hamza, and how hamza is a problematic letter that the Arabs have a problem with, because you block and you don't have a release. You don't have qalqala, you don't have, what do? You deal with it, and some Arabs ran away from it, right? So rather than saying yu'minun, they say yu'minun, to run away from it, right? And we talked about that, okay? Then we talked about the flow of sound, right? The letter is not completely dependent on the makhraj. Like it doesn't close. It just gives a slight opening. See the ya here? It does not close, the ya does not hit. It gives a slight opening. Through that opening, the sound is created. Why? I have the vocal cord, the vibrations. They hit here. So this pressure that happens here creates the sound. But it's a weaker dependence on the makhraj. Okay? I'm going really quickly, right? Because this is what we did last time. And then we have partial flow, and I'm going to skip that. Just look at it last time. Okay? Okay. What's the practical usage of this section of strength and mukhawa? That with letters that are sukoon, non-voweled, like s, ash, how long does it take to actually say the letter? If it's a letter that flows, then it takes the longest time. If it's a letter in between, then it takes between time. Then if it's a letter that's strong, that closes the makhraj, takes the shortest time. So we said, like, alam nashrah laka sadrak. The kaf is one of the strong letters. The sheen is one of the softer ones. So the difference should be, alam nashrah laka sadrak. See how much time I gave for the sheen, and how much time I gave for the ha, and how little time I gave for the kaf. So the sukoon letters take much less time, okay? If you didn't get any of this, that's fine, because that was the whole class last time. All right, let's begin. Now we'll slow down the pace and start the lesson. Okay. So we finished the first two pairs. The first pair is, does air flow? The second pair is, does sound flow? It seems like it's actually a very big question. Like, it's not like when we talked about the letters that have opposites, right? What did we say? We said it's either going to be here or here. And these questions are very big that you can imagine. Does air flow? It's either going to be yes or no. For every Arabic word. Okay? Now, the question is now, what is the direction of the sound of the letter? Okay? So let's make this a little easier, okay? So, I have the letter, let's say, what letter do I have? Let's say Sad, for example. Okay? So the Sad is something along those lines. Okay? And then I have the letter. This is very, by the way, this is not real at all. It's very sketch based, right? It could be completely wrong. But the idea is gonna come, right? And then we have the letter Ba. This is the tongue, by the way, and this is the upper palate. When you say Ba, 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 what happens to the sound? It goes immediately out. Ba, 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 Ba. But when you say the letter Do, what happens? The sound so the sound goes up a little bit and then leaves. Actually, the dad, it does not leave immediately. We're going to talk about that. But for now, okay? The sound actually stays a little bit inside the mouth. And it actually hits the upper palate. So, what does this cause? It causes this heaviness sound. Whoa. Let's give a better example because dad has a special case. So let's give qaf. Qaf would be something like this, right? Let's say qa, qa, qa. Qaf does not go out immediately. You feel, try it. Qa, qa, qa. Try it. You will feel that. Qa. You feel that the sound is still inside for some reason. It's doing something and then leaving. But you feel pressure in the upper palate. Pressure in the upper palate. Say, qa, qa, qa. You feel that the upper palate has vibrations. Now say ba, 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 ba. No vibration. The sound seems to go immediately. Okay. So, a lot of people define isti'la in different ways. Okay? So a lot of people use this definition, and a lot of people use this definition, and there is a way to combine them, right? So I'm gonna show you the way. So what is elevation? So what is elevation? Elevation is the elevation of the back of the tongue when pronouncing the letter. What causes the sound to actually hit the upper palate is the elevation of the back of the tongue. So the back of the tongue, when it elevates, causes the sound to hit the upper palate, to hit the dome of your upper palate, and then you get the thing. So the elevation of the back of the tongue causes the movement of the sound to the dome of the palate. So what happens? I move my back of the tongue, vibrations happen in the dome of the palate, leaves the sound with heaviness. Does that make sense? So let's try qaf again. And try to feel the back of the tongue actually going up. So I want you to feel two things. And again, we talked about this last semester. This whole idea is, I want you to feel, to have a relationship with the letter. You want to have a conceptual understanding and a feeling understanding of what I'm saying and map it to your feelings and to the sound that you're hearing. This way, when you map it to the sound and to the feeling that you're getting, you know, even you're gonna know what a person, like when a person recites in front of you and makes a mistake, you're gonna know what he's doing with his tongues without even looking at it. Why? Because you've mapped out what actually happens. Okay? So I want you to feel two things. I want you to feel the back of the tongue going up, and I want you to feel the vibrations in the upper palate. Let's try. Ro, 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 ro. Do you feel the back of the tongue? Yeah? So, غو. Okay. Now, I have a game. So the elevation, the tongue is a muscle. So a lot of people have a problem with heavy letters. So what do? I have a game. What do? Your tongue is a muscle, so you actually have to practice it. So what do? I say, oh. I keep going back with my back of the tongue till it reaches the top. The idea with that is that you want to practice your back of the tongue to go even more. Some people say ta, ta. That's not right. Some people say to, to. That's a bit better. Some people say to, to. That's good. What's the difference there? A person's tongue is able to reach the back of the tongue goes up. Some people's muscles are weak and they can't do that. That requires a lot of practice. Khalas? So again, what happens? Elevation of the back of the tongue causes the rising of the sound, causes the tafkhim. Can you technically elevate without this movement? I don't know. I don't know, right? So keep these two ideas in mind in general, okay? What is heaviness? Heaviness, it is a fattening, whatever, that occurs to the letter so that the mouth gets filled with its echo. Okay? What is this small thing? We said there is non-essential properties, and I separated them in two. Very technical stuff. But the idea is some non-essential properties do not change. Like they stay with the letter all the time. But they're not essential. Essential is what? So that distinction is very technical, but that's an example of a non-changing, non-essential property. Because it is not what's actually part of the letter. It is part of what happens when you do what's part of the letters. It's a cause, like this is it's part of the letter, causes this. Okay? Very technical, unneeded. What is the idea that I want to give you here? The idea I want to give you is, back of the tongue goes up, vibration to the dome, practice your tongue. Khalas? Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so another example, ra. See the back of tongue goes up, the sound hits the dome. Here, the ra when it's light. Look how the ra when it's light, the back of the tongue is flat. When it's heavy, ra, ri, ra, ri, ar, 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 ar. Okay? The back of the tongue goes up. This one is down. That's all I do. Like when I do ar, that's all I do. So when I say fir'aun, fir'aun, fir, I don't say fir, fir, fir. Okay? Inna fir'auna, inna fir. See how a small technicality, part of your normal recitation. Inna fir'auna ala fil. Small technicality. But if you get it right and you do it properly, the flow of your recitation, rather say inna fir'auna or inna fir'auna. No, you're relaxed. Inna fir'auna ala fil ardi. Okay? Make sense? Okay. What are the letters of heaviness? These are the letters of heaviness. Kha, sa, da, gha, ta, qa, gha. But there is some guys that are kind of weird. Okay? We have alif, lam, ra. Okay? Alif, lam, ra, although they are letters of actually the back of the tongue going down, like they're not back of the tongue going up, they're back of the tongue going down, they're sometimes heavy. Like the ra, the example of the ra we gave here. So we're going to go quickly. When does these letters are heavy? These letters are always heavy. The other ones, khus, sadat, and qidr. Always, in all scenarios, in all cases. It's an essential part of, it's an essential property. What is essential property? It's a property by which if it does not exist, the letter does not exist. So these ones, are essential properties, so therefore it's always heavy. It's always heavy. Alif lam ra, it's not an essential property. خلاص? So when is alif heavy? Is heavy only if the letter before it is heavy. Very simple. Right? فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتَ. So alif, before it, طَ. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ. طَ. Okay? Lam. Only in lafzul jalala. You say eh? Allah. Allah. You don't say Allah. You don't say Allah. You say Allah. And it's only heavy if it's preceded by fatha or dhamma. You have a question? Yeah. Tuba. Yeah, what about that? Just wow. Yeah, tuba. So tuba. Yeah. Okay. The waw is a bit weird. I can tell you because the waw on its, this is again technical to the side, not the waw by its nature, the back of tongue goes up a little bit. For the particularities of waw itself. So that's why it feels sometimes that waw is heavy. And sometimes people who actually cannot bring the back of tongue going up, they actually add dhamma. So they say Khalid, Khalid, Khalid. It should be Khalid, Kho. But because they can't bring the back of tongue going up, it's weak, they kind of compensate with a bit of dhamma. So they say Khalid, Qala, Qala, Qala. It's not Qala, it's Qala, Qa. You see that? So if you add dhamma, if you add some salt and pepper there, you're making a big mistake, okay? And why is the dhamma? Because part of the particulars dhamma is the back of tongue goes up a little bit. But that's something completely to the side, okay? Yeah? Yeah? Good? Okay. So we said alif is heavy when the letter before it is heavy. We said lafz al-jalala is heavy what? If it's preceded by, like lam, by the way, when we say lafz al-jalala is heavy, I'm talking about the harf al-lam, not hamza or ha. I'm talking about the lam. The lam is heavy when it's preceded by fatha or dhamma. But if it's preceded by kasra, like what example? Bismillah, Bismillah. We don't say Bismillah. We say Bismillahir. Okay? So if it's preceded by fatha or dhamma. Okay? And then the ra has a lot of details. We're going to have one whole lesson for ra. We're going to have one whole lesson for ra. It's actually very easy, but it requires a whole lesson on its own. Okay? Okay. Ghunna. Ghunna is a bit technical as well. Okay. When is ghunna heavy? Ghunna is heavy if the letter after it is heavy. So we don't say min qabl. We say min qabl. Min. How does that work? How does that work? Like, what do I do? Again, why do we talk about how it doesn't work? Because if a person cannot do it, we can help him. So that's the whole point. So how does it work? I'll tell you what's in the book, and I'll tell you some of what I think it is as well. What's in the book? And again, put on what I'm going to say right now an asterisk because I need to research more on it. But again, that's in the book, but I need to, okay? What's the idea? Is that generally in heaviness in general, the epiglottis actually moves backwards a little bit. The throat, part of the throat actually goes back a little bit. There's a tightening of the throat. Like tightening means the space gets tightened, okay? With the back of the tongue going up causes the heaviness. But generally when people talk about it, they never talk about, this is something technical that I found in one of my reference books. When he talked about ghunna, that same reference book, when it talked about ghunna, it talked about that mostly the heaviness of the ghunna comes actually from the tightening of the vocal cords. What I say is that obviously it is also the tightening, okay? But it's also the back of the tongue going up a little bit as well. But that's completely conjecture. I still didn't look into it, right? What the book says is that it is the movement of the epiglottis causing the tightenings of the throat that causes the heaviness of the ghunna. So when you say mew, 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 that tightening is a lot of the cause of the heaviness. But because the reason I say it's also the back of the tongue is because the epiglottis is also, as the reference book says, part of heaviness in general, right? And also I'll explain a lot more these details when we go to ikhfa. When we go to ikhfa, I'll explain from beginning to end how to do ikhfa in general. Like, what is that sound? Is it from the nose? Is it from the mouth? It's a whole lesson. But the idea I just want to tell you today, because again, I cannot teach ikhfa today, is that the backward movements of the epiglottis is part of the, as the reference book says, it's part of heaviness in general. Even kha, even qaf, even stuff like that. I think he mentions it more with ghunna because it's emphasized more, or its power is emphasized more here. Okay? But again, this section, just put an asterisk on it. Okay? Okay. But the idea is, when is ghunna heavy? When the letter after it is heavy. Yeah. Okay. Now we're just going to talk about the opposite. We talked about back of tongue goes up, the lowering, the back of tongue goes down, causing no sound to rise in the dome. It just goes immediately outside, causing what? Something called tarqiq, which is lightness. So you have heaviness versus lightness. Just the complete opposite. I think that's very clear, okay? I'm not going to go through it quickly, right? And what are the letters of lightness? Everything else other than khussadat al-qidh. Why? Because they're opposite attributes. Okay? Make sense? Okay, question. Wait, what is this? Oh yeah, okay. All right. Question. What is heavier? Kha or khi? Which one? Kha. Okay. Ta or tu? That's a harder one. Which one? Tu or ta? Tu. Okay. Which one is heavier? Qu or aqqa? Aqqa. Qu? Question mark? Okay. So, let's do it again. Kha or khi? Kha. That's clear, right? Okay. Ta or tu? Tu. Okay? And this one is question mark. Okay. So, the first one is right, second one is wrong. Let's go. All right. There's two schools of heaviness, of how to do heaviness in general. You can recite with either one of them. And the difference is very slight. So you're not going to be like, two people recite. But there is a significant difference, okay? So, if the letter has fatha, it's the highest level of heaviness. Now, let's do it because you guys said the dhamma. So let's actually do it because let's prove it to you, right? It's part of what the letter is. It shouldn't be something you fake or something you add, except obviously if you're saying it completely wrong, then you have to. But I'm saying in general, it's part of it. So hear it properly and let's think about to. Okay? Now, tu. Do you hear it? Okay, let's do it again. To. Do you still believe which one is heavier? Ta is heavier? Question mark? Question mark.
No, I can't keep I don't know.
Okay, I'll do it one more time.
Okay.
To.
Like, how do you measure the heaviness?
You hear it. Again, ba or to. Okay? That's the reference point we're talking about, right? Ba or to. Okay?
But for me, both of these, they sound quite heavy.
No, both are quite heavy. Ta is the heaviest letter. So the dhamma of ta is very heavy. But we're talking about which one is heavier.
So like you control how.
You don't control. It should be natural. Should be. But that's a hard question, to be honest. I'm not
If
gonna.
you wanted to purposefully make the dhamma heavier, would you be able to, or is that like
Oh, oh,
if you
oh.
artificially manufactured?
Yeah, you can. I think you've. Oh, oh. You're kind of muffling it a bit, but you can play a little bit. Okay. But if you say it naturally, to, 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 to. Huh? What do you think? Still question mark?
Sure.
That's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Okay. So I think now we agree to some extent that the fath is heavier than the dam. Then we have the kasra, and that's easy. Ta, ti. Yani it's very clear. Qa, qi. Qu, qi. It's very, even the difference between dhamma and kasra is very clear. Now, what do we do about sukoon? And that's the major difference between the two schools, right? What do we do with sukoon? You look at the letter before. So you say, yaqta'un, yaqo, yaqo. So it should be the same heaviness of the fatha. I kind of did it badly because I do the other school generally, and I'll show you the other school. Suq, suq. This is very difficult, to me at least. And then shiq, shiq, shiq. You notice how weak it is? What's another example? There's a famous example. Afrigh, afrigh, for example, right? So the ra is kasra. So you say, ربنا أفرغ أفرغ. Why? Because you're doing the weakest one. So you look at the letter before and you do the level of the letter before. خلاص? ربنا أفرغ. The second school, what it was going to do? It's going to do ربنا أفرغ. Okay? What is the second school? وقيل بل مفتوحها مع الألف. Okay? This is a poem, by the way. I can show you the poem maybe after. Okay? وقيل بل مفتوحها مع الألف. The second school differentiates between fatha and fatha with alif. Is that necessarily like a real distinction? We can argue. Okay? But that's the second school. It differentiates between just fatha and the fatha with alif. It says the fatha with alif is heavier. And it's just because you have much more time for that vibration, you can say. But again, okay? وقيل بل مفتوحها مع الألف وبعده المفتوح من دون ألف. After it is fatha without alif. مضمومها ساكنها مكسورها. So then ضمة, سكون and kasra. So sukun has its own level in this. Because again, what's the previous one? These three. Right? Fatha, dhamma, kasra, right? And then sukun, you follow whatever. This one has this weird thing in the top, ignore that. It's still the same. But the difference is the sukun has a level of its own. That's why we say, رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ. So I go here, I don't go heavier than the dhamma, but I go in the middle. Okay? Make sense? So school number one, fatha, dhamma, kasra, sukun follows the letter before. This one, fatha, dhamma, sukun, kasra. Fatha, dhamma, sukun, kasra. So the difference is sukun and obviously fatha with alif. But the main difference is sukun. What do we do with sukun? Do we go with the letter before or do we have a level for it independent? That's the main difference, okay? Because like if you ask, so for the first one, for example, if you ask the previous school, how are you going to say qala? They're probably going to say in the same way. Like he's going to say qala here and he's going to say qala here. But this guy is making a more conceptual difference. He's saying the qaf with fa alif is for me significantly different than fatha alone, so I'm making it its own level. So that's not necessarily, probably, from what I know, again, this is from me. It's not from the book, from me. It's not necessarily a difference. What is the actual difference is sukun. Hello? Make sense? Make sense? Okay. Okay. Now, this should be a fatha. That's a mistake right there. Okay. Now, question again. Is to or kho? Which one is heavier? Two people are saying to. Huh. To or kho? To. Huh? Question mark. Yeah? You say kha? Okay, I'll do it. To, kho. Actually, I did it really badly, but never mind. Okay. Now, lu or qu? Lu or qu? Lu. Ri or ghi? I think that's very clear. Okay. The fact that you guys are not differentiating is probably my mistake. I think the difference should be a lot clearer than that. But the idea is these ones are heavier than those ones. But probably my pronunciation is not good. I'll have to look into that. Anyway. All right. So let's go back. What did we say? We said it asks questions. The first question is, does air flow? Yes, no. Does sound flow? Yes, no. What is the direction of sound? Up, down. The last one is the sound confined? So what do we mean by that? Okay. Let's actually read the definitions. Oh. Okay. Okay, that's the change that I didn't. Okay. This is wrong. I changed it, but somehow the change didn't. Okay. I think the definition is, yeah. So the definition I'm going to give you right now is not from the books exactly, but it's the same idea. So take that with an asterisk, but the idea in general is correct. Okay. What is adhesion? Ignore this because it's wrong. Is the adhesion of the tongue with the upper palate. Again, this is not the best definition in the world. There's much more specific and better definition. But the reason is we couldn't parse them out fully properly. We can talk about that later. But the idea is adhesion of the tongue with the upper palate. What do I mean by adhesion? It's coming much closer. The tongue is coming much closer to the upper palate. What does that cause? So let's actually look at it, right? So let's see. Now, this is not to scale, not to anything, okay? But just imagine with me, right? So the back of the tongue, and so the back of tongue goes up, okay? Okay, I maybe it's something like that, okay? Okay, so the reason I'm hesitant is that generally the references make like what's it called? A semi-reference that there is a curvature here. But I'm not fully sure, is there a curvature or not? Okay, but let's assume there is a curvature. And then, now, look how in the qaf, let's look at the qaf here, and let's look at this. Okay, let's make the curvature a lot clearer. Again, this curvature we're not sure about, but the idea. Look how the qaf, the back of the tongue only goes up. So it hits the upper palate and leaves. Now, because the tongue is much more up there, you go here, you hit, you go. You hit and you go. So what happens? The sound is confined more because most of your tongue is actually upwards. So the sound is much more confined. So what happens? More heaviness. More heaviness, more confining, more hitting the dome, the more the letter is heavy. Okay? To, to. Now, try to and try, for example, kho. To, kho, to, kho. Okay? Again, my pronunciation is not the best, but the idea is is that the sound with the qaf leaves, hits the thing and kind of leaves. This one, the sound is kind of confined in the middle because the tongue is up. Most of the tongue is kind of up. So it kind of hits, right? But if only the back of the tongue up and the thing is down, it hits and leaves. But when most of the tongue is close and embracing the upper palate, the letter is confined in the middle. So it's the adhesion of the back of the tongue with the upper palate causing the confining, causing more tafkhim. Make sense? Questions? Yeah. Yeah, that's wrong. It's adhesion itbaq. Itbaq, yeah. So this ignore this first part. I will change it again. Like that's not the definition. Just the first line is completely wrong. Okay. So adhesion is itbaq. Okay. Look at this. So look at this example. Actually, look at here. Look at the then. The sound goes immediately out. But now look here, because most of the tongue is up. Look how much most of the tongue is up. The sound hits and stays. The more it stays, the more the heaviness increases. You see that? Does that make sense? Yeah? Any question? Okay, what are the letters of itbaq? The letters of itbaq are 4 letters. Ta, dha, sad, dad. Okay? These are the 4 letters of itbaq. Okay? Now, if you really think about it now we have heavy letters that have adhesion and heavy letters that don't have adhesion. Right? Like, for example, the letter kha, right? The letter kha. It is heavy, right or no? Why? The back of the tongue goes up, the sound hits, everything is good. But it does not have adhesion. So the sound is not confined in that area. So what happens? The kha is lower in heaviness than these letters. These letters are heavier than kha, qaf, and ghain. These are the other letters. So these are all letters of elevation. These are all letters of elevation. These are adhesion, and these are openness, the opposite of adhesion. So all of these are letters that have the back of the tongue going up and the sound hitting the dome. But this one, not only the back of tongue goes up and hitting the dome, the back of tongue goes up and most of the tongue also comes close to the upper palate, causing the sound to be much more confined there, causing more heaviness. That's why I asked you here, which one is heavier? The ta is heavier than the kha. The dad is heavier than the qaf. The dha is heavier than the ghain. And notice I use the same level of like dhamma dhamma, kasra kasra, fatha fatha. Okay? What is the opposite? Obviously ignore the first line. Lack of adhesion between the tongue and the upper palate causes the lack of confinement of sound, causes lesser tafkhim or no tafkhim. Because some open letters are just, the back of tongue does not go up. Right? Like seen. Seen is open and lowered. It does not have elevation. Does that make sense? Any questions here? These are the 2 of the most important sifat. So the first 2 important sifat are hams and does sound flow and does air flow. These are very important. In practicality, we're talking about practicality now. In practicality, does airflow and the sound flow are so important. خلاص? And also heaviness is so important. It makes your recitation go up or makes your recitation go down. If I say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, still everything else is good, but the heaviness is not good. But if I say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Example, I can say فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ. But I can say فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ. The difference is very huge. What did we say with practicing? Back of the tongue goes up. Back of the tongue goes up. So these two sifat are very important practically as well. خلاص? Any questions? Very good. Very good. Okay. Adhesion versus elevated. Oh, last thing with adhesion and elevation, and then we're going to go to the last thing. Adhesion letters are heavier than elevated letters, obviously. And adhesion letters don't get affected by kasra. So, this is from my sheikh. It's not from the. This part is from the book, but the next stuff I told you is from my sheikh directly, not from the book. So, we said, what did we say the levels? We said the levels fatha, and then dhamma, and then sukoon, and then kasra. In the second madhab, right? Kasra does not get affected in the book. My sheikh said, these two just go up here. Meaning that the level of sukoon, the level of kasra, the level of dhamma, of ta, for example, so tu, atu, and ti are the same level. That's from my sheikh directly. From the book, the kasra is not affected. So you can say, maybe it's like this, from the book. But from my sheikh, he says, the dhamma, these two are the same level as dhamma for adhesion letters. But again, this is level of technicality. Yani if your recitation is so good, to the point that's your only mistake, okay? Again, a lot of this is theoretical. But again, it's very important if you want to perfect your recitation, okay? All right, again, this part of the thing got changed a bit, but the change did not happen, but it's fine. Okay. Now, this section does not have any relation to Tajweed at all. So you can zone out. The reason we mention it is because in the famous poem of Tajweed that we're following, the Sheikh actually mentions that part. And you can see now the relationship between the Arabic language and Tajweed. Most of what we talked about is part of the Arabic language. Yani, without Quran, you're still going to have to say qaf like that. Right? Without Quran, you're going to have to say ta if you're an Arab, by virtue of being Arab. Tamam? But without Quran, you're going to say ya. You're not going to do that. You're just going to say ya ayyuha. Right? You're not going to do the med. The med is by virtue of the Quran. Like the Prophet ﷺ gave us the Quran like this. So we say ya ayyuha. But we didn't get ta from the Prophet ﷺ. Ta existed. The Arabic language existed before the Quran. So this is Arabic. And that's why some of the beginning people, I think, were mostly grammarians and people of Arabic, right? And now you can see bits of that. Why bits of that here? You can see something that's not related at all to Tajweed in the Arabic language. So I'll just mention it quickly. What are these letters? These letters are letters that are easy to say. That's the idea. But what's the point of them? The idea of them is this. Every Arabic word has a root, right? Every Arabic word has a root. If the root is 4 to 5, so if the root letter is actually 4 or 5 letter word, and it does not have any of these letters, then it's actually not an Arabic word, it's actually a foreign word that came into the Arabic language. And the famous example, I remember, I unfortunately didn't put it here, it's called asjad. which I think it's a name for gold. Right? This is the root word, and it's a 4-letter, and it does not have any of these letters. It does not have farra min lub. It does not have fa or ra or mim or noon or lam and ba. Obviously, what do we know from this? It's masjid, right? Masjid is right there, the meme. Right? You can see masjid right here. So masjid is part of the Arabic language, but this one is not. Okay? I don't know, obviously, if it's 4 or 5 and has the farra min lub, is it 100% an Arabic language or not? I don't think so. I'm not sure, actually. I don't know at all. But what I know is that if it's 4 or 5 and it does not have any of these, then it's considered a foreign word into the English language, Arabic language. And what's the point of that? Is that what they say is that these letters are easy to say. They make words easy to say, and the Arabs would not have words that Arabs don't have words that big without these words that make stuff easy. Okay, so eloquency words are added for ease of pronunciation. Again, this is not. I'm not an expert at all of this. I literally copy pasted this section, and this is not part of Tajweed at all. So the most I know about this is literally what was exactly written. All the other stuff is practice, and it's Tajweed. And the other letters are just the other letters. Okay, and these are not words of easy words to say. How did they define that? Have no idea. Why did they define it that way? Have no idea. Why did it work that way? Have no idea. Okay. Why are we mentioning it? It's because that's the most famous poem of Tajweed mentions these two sifat in the poem, and we're just following it. And for you to be aware, when you learn, if you continue in Tajweed and you see these two, you're like, oh, what is this and stuff like that. Okay. That's it. Okay. So subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Any questions before we actually stop? Any questions with heaviness? Any questions with itbaq? Any questions with asjad or whatever? Yeah, no questions? Okay. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم guys.